We don't know for sure what's going to happen with the presidential race. Stay tuned. Maybe we'll find out later on today. But if Joe Biden does end up winning, we don't know what the Senate is going to look like either. And at least in the short term, it looks like there's a good chance that Mitch McConnell, of all people, will still be in control. And apparently, that might put a lot of pressure on Joe Biden to do things that I as a leftist fear he kind of wants to do anyway. So let's talk a little bit about some of this reporting that's been done by Axios. They're saying Republicans' likely hold on the Senate is forcing Joe Biden's transition team to consider limiting its prospective cabinet nominees to those who Mitch McConnell can live with, according to people familiar with the matter. The new Senate political math could dash the ambitions of some Democrats, including those who have clashed with Republicans. So what would this look like? A source close to McConnell tells Axios a Republican Senate would work with Biden on centrist nominees, but no radical progressives or ones who are controversial with conservatives. The Biden agenda would be severely restricted by GOP control. Quote, it's going to be armed camps. And so what are some examples of people that they would not be okay with? Well, obviously, they're not interested in Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. But I have also heard that people like Stacey Abrams was in the reporting I saw that they're not interested in her being involved in the cabinet in any way. I'm sure it's just because they think she's a hardcore communist or whatever. They don't have any other problems with her. But anyway, Mitch McConnell is apparently going to be trying to limit who can actually get confirmed to be on his cabinet. Malika, my fear is that I don't think Joe Biden has any interest in Warren or Bernie being on his cabinet anyway. And so I fear that this is sort of an excuse for him to do with what he normally wants to do anyway, which is probably get some old establishment Democrats, some Wall Street picks and things like that. How do you see this shaking out if Mitch McConnell is still in charge of the Senate?
That's the concern for me too. I think this is just, it's just handed to Joe Biden that it's something that is pretty convenient for a way that he's already governed and the way that he's already implemented policy over the last, I don't know, about 40 years or 50 years of his career. So I think that this is incredibly convenient for him. Democrats had the same sort of excuses, even when Barack Obama had, held to two houses. So I think that it's going to just play into the way that Joe Biden has already done politics, and I think what his fundamental ideology is. I do not think that he's a liberal. I don't even think he's a centrist. I think he is a conservative who just is less explicitly racist than Republicans are prone to be. And he's still very racist in a lot of his rhetoric and the way that he talks about poor Black communities and low income communities. But I think he's just been able to find a home in the Democratic Party because they're less explicitly so. Mm-hmm. So if you even go back to some of his commentary or that of his advisors, and this is in the middle of a pandemic where there's likely going to be a recession, there's already extensive unemployment. He was already telling Wall Street Journal reporters, or I should say his administration was, that they are probably going to be unlikely to pay for any of the progressive policies that they have been, hitching their wagon onto over the last several months to try and get progressives and radicals into the Democratic tent to make sure that they came out and voted for him. So we can just go to his own statements, the statements of his own advisors, that this is something that they weren't interested in before any of these Senate races.
Yeah, if we're at the point, and we don't know for sure it's gonna go this way, we're gonna talk in a little bit about some of the runoffs that might change this, the math here. But if we're at the point where McConnell is effectively talking about you can't even have cabinet picks that you want or that you pretend to want at the very least. I'm assuming at that point we can forget about legislation. We can forget about potentially stimulus for COVID. He's pretending that he wants it. We'll talk about that too. So if a Supreme Court seat opens up in year 1 or year 2, do we have any reason to believe that Mitch McConnell is going to ever have a hearing for that? I mean, are we effectively looking at not just, Obama era, there's a filibuster on literally every bill, but now we're talking about no Supreme Court, no judges below the level of the Supreme Court, no cabinet members. Are they gonna hold up like the naming of post offices and stuff like that? Is literally anything gonna get done between now and 2024 if Mitch McConnell's still in charge?
Right, it's hard to see this presidency with Joe Biden being super effective, and so I think that tells us two things. I think one is that you have to listen to progressives and organizers before there's an election season. The fact that people consolidated power around somebody who was relatively unpopular. If you look at the polling around enthusiasm for Joe Biden, it was like much lower than, it was lower than it was even for Hillary Clinton. And so the fact that the Democratic Party consolidated power around somebody who many people were reluctant to vote for, it means that there's also people were also saying, okay, well, we might need to think about getting Trump out, but what is step 2 in terms of actually what do we want? So we know what we don't want, but what do we want? What policies, what vision is this party going to be about? And if you're not rallying support around policy, around a vision, you're going to get folks who might feel lackluster about, and you're also going to have Senate candidates, the DCCC, for instance, who are going to be promoting candidates who are not visionary, who are not progressive in any way. And so you're not going to have the support that you even need for a Biden presidency if you think that, okay, well, suddenly he's now going to be progressive, even if you just take that at face value. How is he going to implement any of that if you do not have enough support down ballot? And that's precisely what we're seeing right now. And so, that's the first thing, is the fact that this probably could have been avoided if they went for somebody that people were a little bit more excited about. But secondly, you also have to maybe reframe what it means to be progressive, what it means to be radical. I'm a socialist, so I don't really even identify as a progressive. But for people who do, what do you do in the next 4 years? So I think the thinking has to go from, okay, well, let's just keep talking about the senators and the federal administration being hypocritical, to what do we do in light of that? What can people do at a local level? What can they do at a state level? What can they do with city budgets? And figure out how to implement more of a local strategy where it's probably going to be more effective over the next 4 years.
Yeah, no, I think that that's very wise. And I think Mitch McConnell's threat here, I think it's actually very useful. Let's say that hypothetically, Mitch McConnell does stay in charge of the Senate. You have Biden sworn in, and now he's facing this threat where Mitch McConnell's like, no, you can only have the CEO of Goldman Sachs in charge. That's the only person we're gonna confirm. I think this is almost good for us as people viewing Biden to get an idea of what he's gonna do over the next 4 years, because he could very easily just appoint acting cabinet heads. He could have whoever he wants. He could give Elizabeth Warren, labor if that's what she wants. I don't necessarily understand why she'd want to leave the Senate, but let's say that she does, and she seems to. He could give it to her. He gives Stacey Abrams a position. He could just do it. He could do that. If he doesn't do that, knowing that he can, I think that sends a pretty strong signal to us about what he's willing to fight on and what he's not. And I would argue that what he's willing to fight on is nothing, like literally nothing over the next 4 years. So that's gonna be depressing, but I think it will be instructive. And we should remember that while we do need to fight during presidential elections, that is necessary. We also need to fight, much more importantly, during primaries. And I would say even before that, we need to fight to get the right people to run the primaries. There are a million battles that need to be waged simultaneously. Very few of them directly have to do with Joe Biden or going forward Kamala Harris the next time around. The squad was expanded, or will be expanded, going into this next congressional session, because people didn't focus exclusively on the presidential race. And they did find good people, activists at the ground level, to run these races. And maybe they didn't even win the first time. Maybe it was like Cori Bush, but eventually they continued to back them, and now they're going to be exerting at least some influence over the party going forward. So yeah, a little bit depressing looking forward, but we'll see. Anything else you want to say about Biden interacting with a majority leader, Mitch McConnell?
Sure. I think just the last thought in terms of where he is, he's already said that he's fighting for normalcy and civility. This is a man who found normalcy and civility with Strom Thurmond, who was a staunch segregationist. So this plays again right into Joe Biden's existing way of doing things and worldview. He's tweeted about the fact that we need to be able to accept our enemies or not view, the opposition as enemies, and that is a completely, I think, backwards and I don't even know if I would say naive. I think this is intentional and allowing him to relinquish any sort of fight for true progressive legislation.
Yeah, who should be saying stuff like that? Gap. I don't know if people saw their tweet about the red and the blue shirt. It was like half red, half blue, and they're like, hey, we can all wear the colors or whatever. Like, no, shut up, Gap. Shut up. Seriously, shut up. We're trying to do something important here. But yeah, Biden's like, they're gonna have an awakening and they're gonna be, no, dude, they're not gonna give you anything. They hate your guts, you moron. Seriously, he seems like a nice guy. But no, they hate you. And they talk about civility and normality. No, their normality isn't normal, their civility isn't civil. It's not, it's good for them, they like it, they've benefited from it, they wanna continue to benefit from it. But the people who are hurting right now don't need to go back to 2015. 2015 sucked in a million different ways. Some less than the last few years, but they still sucked. And I hope that people don't forget that.
Right, he's bringing finger guns to an AR-15 fight, so we just got to be prepared for that.
He is, and not just the John. Oh my God, I'm forgetting Jim Carrey. Not just the Jim Carrey version. Yeah, him as well. I hope not, dude. Biden, you have been trying to become president for like 40 years now. Use it for something. You wasted a half a life doing this. If you finally get it, use it for something good. Come on, pick a fight. Pretend they're corn pop, man. Pretend the GOP is corn pop and fight like you would have back when you were supporting the segregationists openly. God.
Right, no, he'd rather AOC, so, you know.
I know. Well, if it comes down to that, I know who I'm siding with. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.